So for our automation presentation, I thought I would do education. When it comes to education, um, many things are automated these days. Um, something like Canvas as an example. Yeah, I'm sure it requires some human effort, but for the most part, once it's set up, it works. You have assignments laid out and ready to go. You do the assignments, and you know, by and large, if they're a multiple choice, for example, they're pretty much graded. Um, so that's just an example of automation in education. But automation, it continues to change many aspects of our world. Education isn't a real exception to that. We have tools to help with grading and tutoring, um, research, even on our end. Everybody we use ChatGPT to help research things that we may not fully understand. So in a way, even the interaction between professors, educators, teachers, and their students is a bit automated now because we have so many tools at our disposal that we can use to ask questions, instead of having to constantly talk to our educators, which can be a good thing. It frees us up, frees our educators up to do things that require, a little more thought than just, some discussion. But at the same time, it takes that discussion, by and large out of it, which automation seems to be doing in all aspects of our lives. And there's not really a sector in which people don't interact less than they did before. So that's one consequence of it. And that's why, thoughtful implementation, I always say, of any technology or process is important. Automation and AI, as an example, is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that needs to be done thoughtfully. But there are some things in education that automation can't replace yet. It's not to say that it won't in the future. But the question becomes, should it ever? Things like making sure that people will have the proper critical thinking skills that they need, and like actually mentoring students, and giving them that bit of an apprenticeship to learn a subject. That's something that you really can't automate, something that still requires a human element, and probably always will to some extent. It goes back to that, implementing things in a thoughtful way. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. A lot of education is going to always require empathy and an understanding of just the human dynamic. It's not something that can always be automated. And if it can, again, the question is, should we? Human educators are able to adapt things to fit your needs and to tailor things and education materials in a way that help you based on your personal needs. And that's not really something that can be done in an automated way, that I would consider effective. Everybody's circumstances are different, and there's nuance required when it comes to education or any human interaction, really. There's just some things that you can't let run on autopilot, and there are a lot of very finite details when it comes to educating people and working with other human beings. And then when we get into the ethical implications of automation, an excessive amount of automation could be, it could be a negative thing because it, again, like we talked about earlier, depersonalizes the learning process. You don't build the relationships necessary to complete the education that you're working on. And that doesn't just affect education, it affects us everywhere. Automating things, again, it reduces the interpersonal relationships that are developed. And when it comes to automation, you have to worry about things like data privacy and surveillance, and just errors in general. There are some errors that humans will catch that an automated system is not going to catch. That may change at some point, but again, thoughtful implementation, right? We should always have somebody double checking things. Certain educational tasks just can't be automated or shouldn't be automated, really. Like we talked about with like mentoring, counseling people, disciplining people when they're not living up to the standards that are set forth, when it comes to behavior and stuff. Those are things that are probably better left to human beings and not being automated, because again, they require nuance. You can't just say, everything's not black and white. Automation, it can certainly enhance our education by taking out a lot of those repetitive tasks that kind of, or just busy work. They remove you from the higher level education and stuff. But it's a tool, and it needs to be, again, thoughtfully implemented. And these implementations are going to be helpful, of course, but they just need to be implemented thoughtfully, like we said. In the end, technology is going to continue to progress and get better and better, especially when it comes to automation. We just have to remember that these things are tools, and they're best used as a tool and not a replacement for the human element. And that's my presentation. Thank you.